This is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and in the video where I tested the water resistance of the orange inks in my collection, I neglected to include the writing sample for Yu-yake. So Yu-yake's going to get its own video, and I thought while I'm at it, I would like to go ahead and compare the writing experience between my dip pen and my daughter's dip pen, just to see if there's any difference in smoothness or how they write. I'll begin with mine. Okay, that was with my pen. Next, my daughter has a little bamboo pen that has a cap on it. The nib looks somewhat similar to mine. We'll see how it writes. And I always, when I'm doing these writing samples, I do a little scribble to get the excess off the nib. There's not a tremendous amount of difference between the two, but I think my daughter's feels just a little smoother. Let's see if more. I don't know. No, it's not smoother. I don't know. I don't know if it's even possible for a glass nib to feel smooth. So if anybody has any experience with glass nibs, if you have one that is smooth, or I'm curious. Before I got my dip pen, I looked at some that were hundreds of dollars. Does that make a difference? I need to let this dry for a little bit, and then I'll come back and do the smear test, and then I'll dunk it in some water and see how much of this ink sticks around. Before I start the water test, I want to take a look at the writing sample. In the previous clip, I remember mentioning that my daughter's bamboo dip pen with the glass nib felt a little bit smoother than my Rohrer Klingner glass pen, but then as I got down later in the writing sample, I said, oh, well, maybe not. But I think the bamboo pen was smoother at first, because my Rohrer Klingner glass pen, you can see initially the ink was coming off pretty heavily, and I remember thinking, wait a minute, is this Yu-yake? This doesn't look like what I remember Yu-yake looking like. But then by the end of that first line, I thought, oh yeah, this is what Yu-yake usually looks like in a fountain pen for me. But with my daughter's pen, the writing sample, that first line was more uniform. So maybe just the ink coming off the nib more uniformly gave it a better feel. But glass pens in general, at least my limited experience, they're not very smooth. But they are fun to play with. Okay, I'm going to do a smear test first with my paintbrush and water. Smears a little bit. Let me zoom in so you can see that. I should have zoomed in to begin with. Smears a little bit, but not too bad. And now I'm going to submerge the entire writing sample in water, and we'll see how much of the ink lifts off or how much stays around. Okay, let's give it one last swish around in the water. Okay, I wouldn't call this water resistant. I can read some of this, some of the scratches down here. I don't know if you would actually be able to read it if that was something printed. One thing I need to point out though, like I mentioned earlier, the ink was coming off the nib much heavier on this glass nib than it does in a fountain pen. So I wouldn't count on being able to recover much of what you've written if you're using Yu-yake. And that's kind of interesting. Maybe it's just the particular orange inks in my collection, but really none of them were water resistant. The only one from the previous writing sample was Colorverse Golden Record, and technically it's more of a brown. It's a brown that leans really heavily toward the orange side. I wonder if that's a characteristic of orange, that it's less water resistant. I know the Colorverse Golden Record, the part of the ink that was left behind was red, so I don't know. We'll have to, I guess, try some other orange inks at some point. But if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.